Ask him for middle ground. There is no middle ground. Talk with Mark Levin now at 877-381-3811.
Well, I thought today was a great day to bring Betsy McCoy on the program. She is, in my view, the number one expert on Obamacare and all its little tentacles through Medicare and Medicaid and all the rest of it. And we have these governors buckling, and the impact on these states is going to be enormous. Betsy McCoy, how are you, my friend?
Well, thank you. I am so honored to be on your show because I am an admirer. You, Rush, and Tom Marr are the voices of liberty. So it's great to join you tonight. And you're right. These decisions by governors, like the Florida governor, Rick Scott, now Chris Christie in New Jersey, it's so venal and short-sighted. They are dooming their states to bankruptcy, and they're dooming their own taxpayers to a burden that those taxpayers will not be able to handle. That's why the Supreme Court ruled for us on this issue.
Yep. Now tell everybody why this is disastrous for a state.
It's a disaster because Medicaid has always been a partnership. The states set the eligibility rules based on what state taxpayers could afford, and the federal government would pay roughly half. But under the Obama health law, the federal government has lured the states with a red carpet invitation to expand Medicaid enormously. It's the way most people get covered under this law. Expand Medicaid, turn us into a Medicaid nation, and the federal government promises it will pay the cost of this expansion. But the feds always break their promises. So you know that after the Medicaid rolls are expanded and all these new dependents are on Medicaid, the federal government is going to say, we've changed our mind. You state taxpayers have to pick up the tab. That's exactly what's going to happen. That's what the Supreme Court justices saw would happen, and that's why they said you can't compel the states to expand Medicaid.
It's amazing. All these Republican governors, Betsy, talk about federalism. They talk about stop sending us all these unfunded requirements and mandates and so forth. And the minute they think they can balance their budgets on the backs of the federal taxpayers, and we're all the same, really, state and federal taxpayers, what do? They sell out immediately.
You know, to politicians, Mark, Medicaid is a verb. It means spend, 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 and hope the feds will pick up the tab. That's why Medicaid spending has been so excessive in the past. But now that the promise is we won't pay half, we'll pay 90%, you can imagine how wasteful Medicaid spending is going to be in the future. But in fact, when the federal government withdraws its promise, which any future Congress can do, the state taxpayers are going to get stuck with a tab so big there will be no money left for schools, for roads, for other customarily state functions of government. It will destroy the states. But, of course, by then, Christie and Scott and the other big shots will be on the way to their next office.
That's exactly right. And, you know, Medicaid now, I believe I'm correct in this, takes up about 25%, give or take, of every state's budget now.
Yes, and larger in some states. It's already breaking the backs of these states. A commission, a bipartisan commission, issued a report last summer warning that states should not fall for this bogus red carpet invitation because in the end it would be the destruction of the states. Every deficit reduction plan in Washington includes breaking this promise that the feds will pay for the expansion of Medicaid. Even the president's plan includes breaking the promise.
And, you know, in New Jersey, they're talking about Christie adding 300,000 people. In Virginia, if McDonnell has his way with his little commission, they're adding 400,000 people.
In Florida, it will expand Medicaid by 42%. It will crush that state. And that's why Rick Perry in Texas is so smart to stand tall, as a Texan should, and say, absolutely not. I will not fall for this.
You know,
and you were terrific to stand up and say it as well.
Well, thank you. But I'm going to tell you something, Betsy. I'm looking more and more at this Rick Perry. I know he's a terrible debater. This guy's tough. I mean, he's not buckling to any of this stuff, is he?
That's right. He has made Texas one of the best places to be because the taxes are low, the business is growing, there's tort reform. He's done a very good job in Texas.
Now, you've written an excellent book. It's called Beating Obamacare, Your Handbook for Surviving the New Healthcare Law. I've linked to it on my social sites. That's
Thank
Beating
you very
Obamacare.
much.
Well, I want you to
Beating
tell
Obamacare.
us about it. Yeah.
Well, I read this 2,572-page law.
You're the one who read it. Yes.
That's right. It's right here on my desk. And Americans are already getting clobbered with the unexpected consequences of this law. For example, most Americans get their health insurance on a job, right? Either their own or their spouse's. And they're already being told that their employer is going to drop their coverage and in some cases push them down to part-time working status as well, fewer than 30 hours a week. And the reason is that this law says that beginning in January, employers with 50 or more full-time workers have to offer coverage, but not just any coverage. They have to offer this one-size-fits-all government-designed benefit package that costs about twice as much as what they're currently offering. So many employers are saying, we can't afford this, we're going to pay the penalty and drop coverage. Or they're pushing their workers down to part-time status, and so some people are not only losing their coverage, they're losing their job as well.
And tell everybody about this Politburo that's set up to destroy Medicare.
This is the saddest of all. You know, seniors get clobbered the hardest under this law because cuts to Medicare pay for over half this law. Cuts to Medicare. So, for example, if you're a baby boomer right now, line up your doctors, because if you wait until you turn 65 and go on Medicare, you will not be able to find a doctor willing to treat you, because doctors are going to be paid less to care for seniors than any other kind of patient. Mm-hmm. And if you're going into a hospital, regardless of your age, you're going to find a much lower standard of care, because this law takes $247 billion out of what hospitals have to care for patients over the next decade. So they're going to spread nurses thinner, and you're going to have to wait longer when you need help.
And don't they, maybe you can elaborate on this. I've heard you talk about this before, and I think I read it somewhere, but I haven't read the whole statute. They punish hospitals if, let's say, a senior citizen patient covered by Medicare comes back within 30 days or something?
Oh, yes. It's even worse than that. Section 3000A of this law awards bonus points to the hospitals that spend the least per senior. Now, I wouldn't take my beloved dog to the vet that spent the least per animal. So why would I want to take my mother to the hospital that spends the least per senior? But, in fact, that's what this law does. It awards bonus points to the hospitals that spend the least per Medicare beneficiary. And, as you just mentioned, when they're calculating which hospitals get points for spending the least, they consider all the money spent on the patient, even for the 30 days after the patient is discharged from the hospital. So a hospital is going to be very reluctant to prescribe physical therapy if you've had a hip replacement or a knee replacement, because that's going to count against them, and they're going to get whacked with demerits. Well, you know, seniors who are having operations of that nature need physical therapy to recover and get back on their feet again.
And I'm thinking as a side issue, although it's not a side issue for a lot of people, the paperwork that's involved in this just must be smothering.
Oh, the government's own actuaries forecast that government healthcare administration, that's bureaucrats telling doctors and nurses what to do, is going to increase from $28 billion, the last year of George Bush's administration, to $69 billion.
Oh, my God.
Can you imagine? All that money wasted pushing paper around instead of actually taking care of people.
And I'll bet those will be damn good paying jobs, won't they?
Oh, you bet. Washington, the Gold Coast now. But that money alone, that increase would be enough to insure 2 million people with fancy health plans every year, and to think that it's being wasted on that instead.
Do you think if a person's elected president who is really focused on undoing this statute, pulling it out from its roots, is going to be able to do so?
I do believe that in the next 3 years, Americans will be so stunned at the price of health insurance, $20,000 for the cheapest bronze plan for a family with 3 kids before the subsidy. They'll be stunned by the plummeting quality of care in the hospitals, the waits for a nurse, the waits for diagnostic tests. Richard Foster, the chief actuary of Medicare, warned Congress, testifying on 2 occasions, that the cuts to Medicare hospital payments would be so severe that it will force hospitals into a financial crisis and into a real austerity situation. Well, that's not what you want to face when you're sick and in the hospital. So, yes, Americans will be demanding a change in this law or a repeal of this law.
But what
and not to mention privacy, Mark.
Yeah.
What about, most of us tell doctors things we wouldn't confide with to anybody else. But now we're going to have to talk with our doctors about keeping 2 sets of books, because everything you tell a doctor now is going to go on an electronic medical record that's going to be seen by many eyes, not even just other doctors. On January 16th, the president announced during his executive actions to curb gun violence that he considered health privacy unnecessary legal barriers. He wanted to make sure those records would be available for background checks and other non-health purposes. The federal government is going to be snooping into those records.
Isn't it amazing? Civil liberties violations, privacy on your medical care violations, taking your policies away, taking procedures away, and yet this is all painted as some kind of nirvana or utopia and compassionate. What do you blame for this? The media? The media, which is utterly ignorant about 98% of this, by the way.
And also hypocrisy. Women's rights groups went to the barricades for decades to prevent the federal government from accessing a woman's health records or dictating to her doctor. It was all about abortion rights. But now they are supporting a law, the Obama health law, that does both. It empowers the federal government to dictate how doctors treat patients, even privately insured patients who paid for their own health plans out of their own pocket, and it gives the federal government access to your medical records. Where are all these women's rights groups now? Silent.
You are absolutely terrific, Betsy McCoy. The book is Beating Obamacare, Your Handbook for Surviving the New Health Care Law. Can you get it on Amazon, too?
Amazon.com. It's called Beating Obamacare, and my picture's right on the front smiling at you, Mark Levin, because you are a champion for liberty.
Well, you're a sweetheart. I appreciate that, Betsy, and God bless you, my friend.
Thank you.
And keep it up. Take care. That's Betsy McCoy. This is a great, great book. Beating Obamacare. But you see what she knows. She knows everything about this statute. So particularly you seniors out there, this is a book you really ought to get, Beating Obamacare. And the rest of us, too. Although I'm 55. Aren't I a senior citizen now?